Hey guys, I welcome you all to the live session on which programming language should you learn first, conducted by an expert programmer who is having more than 15 plus years of industry experience. Before we begin the session, make sure to hit the subscribe button and also hit on the bell icon so that you will never miss an update from us. This session is going to be very interesting. Please stay tuned and watch the video till the end. Now, let's see the agenda.
We're going to be discussing how should you choose your first programming language, as in what criteria should you select. Then we're going to move on to programming languages according to domain, the ease of use, future and current applications of some of the most prominently used programming languages, average income according to the domain, how to get started with any programming language essentially, and the alternative tech career options that do not require programming at all. Right? So let us begin with the first agenda point, which is how should you choose your first programming language, right? So if you ask any academic professional, if you ask any industry professional, who has been in the industry in the last 10, 20 years, right? Most probably they would recommend you to learn either C, C++, or Java when selecting your first programming language. And that is not a bad advice because in C, C++, and Java, you cover almost all of the basics and all of the advanced concepts in programming. So learning even one of these languages helps you cover some of the most advanced concepts in coding, like pointers in C, object-oriented programming in Java, memory optimization, time optimization, code modularity, and architecture. Now, you might not see the benefit to that as initially when you're learning the programming language, but when you start working in the industry where you have to coordinate with a team, you have to maintain and update your software, basically your code should be readable, your code should be optimized, right? These programming languages sort of force you to do that, right? Because when you're learning their syntaxes and all, you're learning the way to implement them, you're automatically forced to implement a lot of these concepts that you may not be forced to implement in learning other programming languages, right? But there is a catch in that because these programming languages are sort of difficult to master. They're not difficult to learn, but they are difficult to master. So, the language that you should choose is not entirely dependent on this particular advice. It also is dependent on your requirements as to why you want to learn programming and the constraints that you may have in your life and the preference, right? Which particular field that you want to get into. Right, so let us understand that, and let me explain to you how you should decide based on certain criteria as to which programming language you should choose. Right. So, firstly, C, C++, and Java are very in-depth and syntax heavy. So that basically means that there is a very large learning curve associated to these languages in order to master them. And also, if you make a singular mistake while writing code in any of these three languages, right? An error would be thrown up instantly because you need to follow the syntax to the teeth, right? The syntax is not very simplified, so you need to basically memorize at certain points or basically understand the concept of why the syntax is the way it is. Right? So the debugging of the program can be a little tough. So there may be various reasons why these languages may not be suitable for your immediate needs. So let me list those reasons out for you. If you have scarcity of time, which means you have less time to learn a programming language, getting into either of these three programming languages is not a good idea because these programming languages need for you to resolve your fundamental questions, your fundamentals, essentially to resolve all of the basics and getting to the advanced concepts is going to take a lot of time. Then, if there is no use of these programming languages in your work line, so say if you're working in an environment where web development is prominent, right, and you immediately need to learn web development in order to become a web developer in your company because that is what is required, right? So you will not go for Java or C++ or C if your company is using JavaScript. So there's that. You need to learn JavaScript immediately, right? Or there could be pressure at work. You might be an experienced individual who is just starting out with coding, right? Learning any of these three languages might not be the most suitable for you because of the pressure that you have at work. So there may be multiple factors. You may not have the mental availability to do it, essentially. So in that case, there are alternative options as well. So the alternative option that I would recommend to you in that case, if you want to start out with programming, you can go with Python, right? So that is an amazing alternative. Let us understand why. So let us look at the Java code for printing Hello World. So Hello World is essentially the most basic program in any programming language. So all programming languages have this yellow Hello World program, right, where you simply print on the output terminal Hello World. So this is what it looks like in Java. You see there are curly braces involved, there are classes involved, there are access specifiers involved, there's a system.out.println, right? So all of these things you can either memorize, right, or you need to clear the concept as to why these things are being used to print hello world, right? So you can do that. Certainly, that is also recommended if you have the time, because that has its own benefits to learn all of that, because it helps you understand a lot of core concepts involved in object-oriented programming. But say, for instance, you don't have the time, you just want to learn and get on with programming. The Python code for printing hello world is simply print hello world, right? So you can understand the difference in the learning curve involved in something like Java when you compare it to something like Python. And the same goes for C++ and C as well. They follow sort of the same code syntax as Java, which is slightly more complex than something as easy as Python. Right. So essentially, with Python, it is very easy to learn, so it will not take a lot of time to learn it. Right. It does not have such a high learning curve. You can learn as much as you require in Python as well, right? In Java, you might have to learn concepts that may never come, basically, that you may never have use for. In Python, you can learn the concepts which are essential to you, right? And you can skip all of the remaining concepts. You do not need to learn that, essentially, is what I'm saying. And Python has a very basic syntax, which is exemplified by this particular slide. Python is very popular as well as a language. It is being used in a lot of industries today. It is very relevant programming language which is being used today, right? There are abundant libraries in Python to perform any task that you can imagine, right? So you don't need to code a lot of functions or a lot of utilities in Python, because libraries are available for those. And libraries are very easy to import in Python. Also, you just simply need to import it in the top line of your code, and then it gets imported. It has the most easy integration with the libraries possible. And lastly, it is useful in almost all of the tech domains. So any domain that you can imagine, because of the availability of abundant libraries, you can implement it in a lot of tech industries, right? Not just development or not just data, in a lot of tech industries. So we'll get to that. As of now, we understood the importance of C, C++, and Java and Python, right? So we basically decided that if we do not have the time to learn C++, C or Java, or we are looking for something easy to go with, we can go for Python. It is a pretty good option or an alternative to those three languages. But it is not limited to that. You might have other requirements as well. The other requirements being that you want to select a language according to the domain that you're going to be working in.
Just a quick info, guys. Intellipaat provides online training on top trending programming languages, mentored by industry experts. The course link is given in the description below. Now, let's continue with the session.
So let us now understand programming languages according to the domain, right? So domain, or the career option that you're choosing, right? Which particular career path that you want to go into, that is what the domain is. So let us understand that from a job perspective.
Just a quick info, guys. Test your knowledge of programming by answering this question. Finding and fixing problems in code is known as A. Coding, B. Automating, C. Debugging, D. Programming. Comment down your answers in the comment section below. Subscribe to Intellipaat to know the right answer. Now, let's continue with the session.
Right. So the first is the most relevant field of this decade, so to speak, right? It is an ever-expanding field. It is the data field, right? Jobs are being created. Demand is only going higher, right? There's a lot of scope for research. There's a lot of scope for innovation in this particular domain, right? So data is the most lucrative and innovative field in the tech industry today because every organization is generating a lot of data, and these organizations or companies need need talented people to process that data and give them the insights and whatever they need out of that data in order to give them commercial success or scientific success, whichever field you're getting into. Right. So let us understand what are the things that you can do with data. You can become a data analyst. A data analyst simply processes the data and answers certain queries that have been asked from that data. And data scientist is slightly different from data analyst. The data scientist essentially does not have the question in mind. He needs to look at the data and figure out a pattern. So that is what a data scientist does. He figures out trends, he predicts patterns. Essentially, that is what the data scientist's job is. Then we have something like the data engineer. So a data engineer basically creates pipelines of data. So he creates pipelines from data cleaning to data processing to data visualization. That is the job of the data engineer. That requires coding as well. Then we have machine learning engineer. If you want to get into the advanced fields, if you're a data scientist, you can easily transition into a machine learning engineer simply by understanding the machine learning concepts because they are not different from the data science concepts. In machine learning, you're essentially taking advantage of hardware to process large sets of data and understanding the sort of patterns and the sort of in machine learning, you are essentially training your algorithm with the use of advanced hardware according to your data set. Then we have artificial intelligence. So, one step ahead of machine learning, if you want to make the computer make decisions by its own, you will go into the field of AI. Then you have data architect, right? So the data architect essentially prepares the data for further analysis. That is the job of the data architect. Then we have a big data analyst. So if you want to get into the field where you're dealing with terabytes to petabytes of data and doing the same exact task, it requires a different expertise when compared to data science or data analyst. So that is big data analyst. Then you have big data architect, the person who basically prepares big data for further analysis. And then you have the big data engineer who creates pipelines for big data. So if you're looking to get into any of these fields, my recommendation would be to learn Python because Python has libraries and utilities for basically adapting to any of these fields. It has libraries for data analysis, data science. It has libraries to integrate your code with data pipelines such as AWS, Google Cloud, and Microsoft Azure. So that is why Python is the most robust language in this particular domain. If you want to simply analyze data, you can basically go for any of these languages. You can go for SQL and you can go for R. SQL is sort of a very important language. I would say, even if you're learning one of these languages, Python and R, I would say learn SQL as a sort of mandate, right? You might not see the need for it initially, but at a later point in your career, when your job is sort of at a higher level, you can perform queries very easily on the data with the help of SQL. Moving on, the web development field. So moving on to the development field from data, if you're into software development, if you want to get into that field, right, websites are a very good option. So every organization needs a great website for e-commerce, promotional or educational purposes. So it all depends on how good the website looks and how responsive the website is. Right. So that is the main goal of web development. So whoever is a good web developer specializes in those two categories. So if you're basically starting out with web development, the languages that I would recommend you to have a grasp on are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So among these three languages, the two languages that I want you to understand very clearly are HTML and JavaScript. CSS is something that you can learn over time, because anybody who tries to learn CSS initially as a whole sort of a language will not be able to do it, because CSS only comes with time. So learn HTML and JavaScript, and learn as much CSS as is required for your particular project at that time, right? So essentially, if you learn these three languages, you can create your very own website. You can create your first website, and then you can move on to creating other projects as well. So as you get more lo so as you gain experience, you can then move on to front end and back end frameworks and libraries. So the back end would include Node.js and PHP. So Node.js is something that I would recommend you to learn because it is based on JavaScript, and the front end that you had learned earlier on was based on JavaScript as well. So it kind of gives you the opportunity to basically not since Node.js is based on JavaScript, you will have the benefit of not having to learn any other language for your backend as well, because JavaScript is something that you have implemented in your front end or your first website. So it's very easy to understand it in Node.js. And then the PHP part of it. So if you want to learn a new back-end technology, you can go with PHP. Although people say that PHP has been outdated for a while now, it's not a technology that has a future, but PHP has managed to basically maintain itself throughout all of these years, right? Simply because PHP is a conceptually easy language to understand. So learning PHP has no harm. So if you find that PHP is more easy for you as a backend technology, you can learn PHP as well. Then we have front-end frameworks and libraries like AngularJS and React.js, right? So these are based on JavaScript as well, and these are essentially libraries and frameworks that would help you implement more dynamic elements into your front-end website and more features into your website, essentially. Right. So if you're looking to get into the web development field, start out with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then if you want to become a full stack or a front end or a back end engineer, learn Angular or React, or for the back end, learn Node.js or PHP. Moving on to the web Moving on to the video game development field. So if you're interested in video game development, if you are fascinated by how video games are working, right, there's a entire field for that. The video game industry is currently at an all-time high, with indoor entertainment activities being sought after, right? So due to the last year, due to 2020 being predominantly work from home, people were looking for indoor activities, and the video game industry was at an all-time high, and that high is not going away anytime soon. So if you're interested in getting into this industry, there are languages that you can go for. I would recommend you to learn either Java or C Sharp. C++ is also a very good option for this particular job role, for this particular career field. Moving on to the mobile application development field. In this particular domain, essentially, you need to understand that everybody has a smartphone with an internet connection, and this has made mobile applications a necessity for most brands and organizations. So, if you're looking to get into this, there are primarily two operating systems that are used in mobile phones. The first is Android. If you want to get into Android application development, I would say that start with Java, and if you have some idea about Java, then you can get into Kotlin. And then if you're looking to get into iOS development, which is the Apple offering for your operating system, then you can go for Objective-C or Swift. And if you have grasp on any of these languages and you want to learn a framework, you can go with either Flutter or React Native, right? So these are sort of utilities that you can use to enhance your application. Moving on to the software quality assurance field, the task of the software quality assurance is to ensure that the applications that are being developed need to be tested for defects and shortcomings. So essentially, after they have been tested for the defects and shortcomings, that those bugs can be resolved. So this is the task of software QA. The primary thing that you may have heard about software QA is software testing. So in order to get into this field, you need to learn either Java or Python or C Sharp because any of these languages have libraries and utilities for Selenium, which is the implement that you're going to be using in order to test your applications.
Just a quick info, guys. Intellipaat provides online training on top trending programming languages, mentored by industry experts. The course link is given in the description below. Now, let's continue with the session.
Then we have the robotics automation field. So if you're looking to get into automation, uh, the importance of that is creating machines to do repetitive work consistently or to perform actions with pinpoint accuracy, essentially to basically remove the need for manual labor for menial tasks or to perform tasks that require a lot of accuracy that is not possible with human hands, right? So that is the task of robotics. So, in order to understand robotics, implement robotics, you can learn either C, C++, or Python, and that would get you started on that particular career path.
Just a quick info, guys. Test your knowledge of programming by answering this question. In the following options, which are Python libraries which are used for data analysis and scientific computations? A. NumPy, B. SciPy, C. Pandas, D. All of the above. Comment down your answers in the comment section below. Subscribe to Intellipaat to know the right answer. Now, let's continue with the session.
Then let us understand the ease of use, future, and current applications of some of the most prominently used programming languages. So, firstly, let us understand it for Python. Python is arguably the best language choice for people who are unsure about their career or may not have a lot of time to learn a language. The advantage that you get with Python, the difficulty level is very easy. It's very easy to use, and you can perform data related tasks Python. You can perform web application related tasks with Python with libraries such as Flask or Django. And then you have mobile applications. You can perform the logic side of mobile applications with Python. And then, obviously, as we had discussed earlier on, robotics and automation. Then, since technologies like machine learning and AI generally use Python as a code base, getting a good grasp of Python will give you the most industry relevant edge possible. So these technologies are evolving. Machine learning and AI are evolving. So you are basically future proof with Python as well if you decide to get into any of those particular career fields, right? So that is the application of Python that you have essentially. Then we have Java. With Java, you understand the full-fledged concepts of object-oriented programming, which include concepts such as objects, classes, inheritance, and code modularity. The difficulty level with Java is moderate, right? So it's not very difficult, but it's moderate. And with Java, you can basically create web applications, mobile applications, and perform testing. So these are the fields where Java is primarily used. Java is a relatively older technology, but it is used in as a tech base for a lot of current architectures and services. So a lot of current applications use Java. It is important to note that Java has hit its peak and the market for Java developers is extremely competitive. You can get into Java for any of these particular domains, but you need to understand that Java developers are abundant and it's a competitive market to basically get a high salary. So you need to be extremely good at Java. So the similar applies for C as well. C is the most important programming language in history as it laid the foundation for all subsequent languages, dealing heavily with low level memory management and code optimization. So essentially, with C, there's a lot of customization opportunities with regards to your memory optimization for your program because you can essentially do it at the machine level itself. Web applications, mobile applications testing, and creating operating systems is something that you can do with C, because operating systems are specifically softwares where you need to manage your memory very carefully. You can do that with C. So similar to Java, C is also the underlying technology for a lot of current services, frameworks, and programming languages due to its highly customizable nature. The demand for highly skilled C developers will be there for the foreseeable future. So if you're a highly skilled C developer, there's a lot of demand for your talents out there. Difficulty wise, C is a moderate to difficult language to learn. So if you want to learn the basics of C, that is a moderate task. If you want to learn the advanced concepts in C, that could prove to be a little bit difficult. Then we have C++. C++ is essentially an offshoot of C. It provides a much high level or easier version of C with robust features and the same memory control features as C. So with C++, you get the same memory customization options as C, but you get a much easier syntax, right? The difficulty level is moderate. C++ can be used for web applications, mobile applications, testing, and video games, as we had discussed earlier on. Right? Due to its highly incorporable nature with other languages and frameworks, skilled C++ developers have a bright future. C++ is easily integratable with a lot of other languages. So if your application, your software is using multiple features, is basically a combination of multiple features, is basically a combination of multiple ends, like the front end and the back end, right? It's very easily incorporable with other languages as well. So C++ developers have a lucrative future. Moving on to JavaScript. So JavaScript is a very common language these days. It is primarily used in web development and application development, right? So it's used in web browsers to execute dynamic elements of the web application. So say you have drop-down menus in websites, like you click on something and a lot of other options are available. So all of those dynamic elements are possible with the help of JavaScript. Your web browser uses JavaScript to process that and execute that, and that is what you see on the web page itself. So the difficulty level for JavaScript is easy to moderate, so it's not that difficult. And then you can develop web applications and mobile applications with it. Provides you with a highly lucrative future for an as an application developer due to the abundance of JavaScript frameworks and libraries for front end and back end technologies, as we had discussed earlier on. So web development is also an industry which is booming. Every company wants a website. So if you learn JavaScript, that can prove handy to you in your career. Let's understand in summary what we have just discussed to basically understand what technology or coding language you should choose, right? So if you want to get into data, you can go with Python and SQL. If you want to get into web applications, you can go with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you want to get into mobile applications, you can learn either Java or Swift. And if you want to get into programming fundamentals, you want to understand programming languages from the ground up, you have a lot of time, you can go with C++, C, or Java. Now, let us understand the average salary according to domains that we have just discussed. So the first domain is data scientist. So this is a very sort of lucrative domain for you. The possibilities that you can get as a data scientist are limitless. Essentially, you can advance into a much higher career path as well. In the United States, it's about $133,000. In India, it's about 8 lakhs per annum, and in the UK, it's 40,000 pounds. Machine learning AI engineer. In the United States, it's $170,000. In India, it's 10 lakhs per annum. And in the UK, it's 55,000 pounds. Full stack web developer in the US, it's $105,000. In India, it's 6 lakhs per annum. And in the UK, it's 33,000 pounds. Now, keep in mind that these salaries are the average salaries. These are not the starting or the end salaries, right? So, if you advance in your career field to a much higher level, these salaries only go up. Then we have Android developer in the United States. It's $100,000. In India, it's about 5.5 lakhs per annum. And the UK, it's 31,000 pounds. We have game developer in the United States. A average game developer earns $63,000. In India, it's also 5.5 lakhs per annum. So if you're skilled and you have worked in the industry for a while, you can earn that much. In the United States, in the UK, you can earn about 34,000 pounds. Then we have software tester. In the United States, you can earn $62,000, and in India, for software testing, you can earn 4 lakhs per annum, and in the UK, it's about 25,000 pounds. RPA developer in the robotics field in the United States, on an average, you can earn $110,000. In India, 7 lakhs per annum, and in the UK, 38,000 pounds. So how do you get started with any language, right? So you've decided what language you want from this video. Now you want to get started with it. So there are ways you can do that. So if you're looking to strengthen your basics, these topics are extremely important. So start out with variables and constants. So this is extremely important, right? Understanding variables and constants. Every programming languages have these. So the first thing that you need to understand is how values are stored in the so the first thing that you need to understand is how values are stored in the memory, right? So these are only possible with variables and constants. And what is the difference between variables and constants? Then after you have understood that, understand how to pass these variables and constants in functions and classes essentially. So functions are blocks of code that can be executed upon demand. So basically, these blocks of codes have names, and whenever you need to execute that particular block of code, you can essentially use that name in your program anywhere, and that basically accounts for code readability and code reusability. Classes are essentially helpful in creating objects. So if you're using object-oriented programming languages, you can use classes to create instances of your program. And then you have data structures. So data structures are very important, especially when you're talking about, say, data related jobs, right? So data can be stored in arrays, data can be stored in trees, data can be stored in queues and stacks. So in order to understand that, you need to understand your data structures really well. So these are especially important for data related jobs and for basically time optimization problems or memory optimization problems. And then you have loops and iterations. So in order to process these data structures, generally we are using loops and iterations. So the primary function, the primary utility of loops and iterations are to process these data structures. So these are the topics that you absolutely need to understand in any programming language that you're going to be learning in order to strengthen your fundamentals to move on to more advanced topics. So, alternatively, if you don't want to learn programming, you don't want to learn coding, what alternative tech career options do you have, right? So, let us look at those. So, you can go into the cloud industry, which would include AWS, Google Cloud, or Microsoft Azure. So, in cloud, you can basically become a architect, a cloud architect. So, that is a very prominent job role, or you could become a cloud administrator as well. So a lot of organizations are using these cloud services. If you have expertise in any of those two domains, then you can basically be of use to those organizations. So cloud administrator and cloud architect. And then you have search engine optimization, you have web analytics. So web analytics comes under digital marketing, essentially analyzing the customers that are visiting the website, that are basically viewing your advertisements. So that comes into web analytics. And then you have Salesforce. If you know how to operate Salesforce, if you know how to set up Salesforce, you can be of great use to sales organizations who are basically performing sales on a day-to-day basis. And then DevOps. So in DevOps, you do not necessarily need to learn how to code. If you simply understand how Linux systems work, right, you can implement DevOps on the builds and softwares that your development team is developing, right? So that is the ops part of DevOps, right? The operations part of DevOps. the person who releases, deploys, and operates and monitors the software that the DevOps team is developing. So you can essentially head on over to intellipaat.com and search for AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, SEO, digital marketing, Salesforce, or DevOps. We have courses available for all of these particular domains, right? So if you're interested in any of those, if you're positively looking at a career which does not require coding, you can look into these particular courses. We are providing the study material that is required. We are providing the resources that are required in order to basically prosper in these particular career fields. That brings us to the end of our session here today, guys. If you liked what you saw, be sure to give us a thumbs up on this video and comment down below any suggestions you have, any feedback you have on this video, or any video that you would like us to make in the future. Right, so these are our contact details. If you would like to inquire about any of the courses, any of the coding languages that we had discussed in this video, you can simply head on over to intellipaat.com and search for that particular language. And if you want to have a custom inquiry, you can contact our sales team at sales@intellipaat.com. Our course advisors are also available 24/7 on our website. If you simply head on over to intellipaat.com, on the bottom right side, you have a chat box. You can chat with our course advisors and ask any queries you have.
Just a quick info, guys. Intellipaat provides online training on top trending programming languages, mentored by industry experts. The course link is given in the description below. So, guys, we have come to the end of the session. Hope you all enjoy the session very much. If you have any doubts, please put down in the comment section below. We will try to answer it as soon as possible. Thanks for watching.